And the way that I handle no.
The hand on the
uh,
chest really does it.
I'm ready. I am ready to discuss all of the things. I don't know, but what is heavy on my brain right now
Mhm.
is just the pieces around the carceral legal system, like the carceral system, criminal legal system, and the harm that that causes, and then like the way that we want to show up, and when there are no other solutions, um, and I'll just say this quickly. Maybe I said this to you before, but I was talking to someone and I was like, there's this way where it's like, oh, we'll handle this. We'll call all the brothers to like, come, beat someone up. And like, okay, that's one way. There's violence in one way. We'll call the cops. There's violence in that way. We'll try to have a conversation and maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. But then what are the options when it doesn't, and how do we as people who like believe certain things say, now what?
Yeah, this is bringing me back to, this is such a random example, but when I was a kid, um, me like a teenager, I'll say, I was really politically active, wrote letters before I could vote to politicians and stuff, and handing out info about Dennis Kucinich to my classmates, being like, "There's a third party option. Make sure you let people know, let your parents know." Like, um,
Yes.
but one of the like things that I got behind somehow was around DWIs and drunk driving, really. And um, this issue felt really close to me because I had two really different experiences. One is that I have an uncle who had been hit by a drunk driver and lost his leg, and was forever impacted by that experience. Um, and then on the other side, I had my dad who's had multiple DWIs, who lost his license twice in my childhood, um, who my life was dramatically impacted by his drinking, and who he thankfully never hurt a person, but he had caused like property damage. Um, and I, I wrote this like really intense, strong letter in support of like DWI, like strengthening the DWI laws, because I felt like it was a real problem and drunk driving is a problem and dangerous, um, and I like sometimes look back on that experience. It's so interesting because I was kind of like, while I felt so close to, I remember knowing in middle school, like, that we were experiencing a lot of financial hardship. My dad just stopped paying the mortgage to try to pay an attorney. And he had been a bit real with me that like he was potentially facing time and he was trying to get out of it. And uh, that would have really, I mean, I just can't imagine how much that would have impacted my life had that happened. Like it already impacted my life, and the fact that like we lost our house and we had to move and we didn't have somewhere and like, those things. But to not have my dad, who for all his messes, he was also in other ways such a supportive person I could be myself with. He was the parent I could be myself with. Um, I it's just so interesting to think back in that 16-year-old brain of like, it seems like the options are, well, we either increase the loss or we don't. And it seems like the only way we can kind of stop this is to strengthen the punishment. Um, and I feel like that's sometimes how it feels, even in our relationships. It feels like the only option is you're dead to me, or like, or I pretend nothing happened. you know. It seems like it often feels like really black and white, or like punishment is really the only option, or like putting someone away, whether that's physically or like physically in a cage or physically like away from us, is the only option. And that's an option in terms of having boundaries. But
Yeah.
like it's just it's not the only thing. And I think it takes so much, for me, it's taken so much undoing to even get to the place of thinking of noticing it within myself, but it still comes up. That like carceral thinking, that like black and white thinking, like this is the only way.
I mean, it takes a lot of work for us to think of a different way because there hasn't been a different way, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
and it starts in kindergarten. Like, you don't go to recess if you did something bad, you know? Like,
Right.
I mean, I spent so much time, like copying dictionary pages outside of the classroom while kids were doing fun things, or sitting on the bench and like having to watch everyone else at recess because I was being punished, right? And then like that was supposed to be the thing that pushed me to want to do better. Like, I don't want to miss recess, so I better not do the thing next time. Um, and so we don't really, as a society, have something to like jump from. Like, it makes sense that we all come from this place. Um, and I think, I mean, something that you said really like stuck up, like, in our personal relationships, like the punishment aspect of like, okay, I'm going to remove someone from my life, and like, is that always a punishment? Can that be a good thing in some way? Someone like maybe feels punished, like I don't get to spend time with you, but it's just like, oh, but I'm loving you from over here, you know. And I'm not saying any way, shape, or form that that's what the carceral system is. But I know, I mean, we fought with this a lot when we were talking about, bail, right? And that like bail, we know is completely unjust. And like, if you're rich, you get out. If you're poor, you don't. Um, and I know somebody who, basically like they would be harassed again and again and again by, a family member that was, on drugs, and that like once bail ended, like that increased. And I was like,
Mhm.
wow, isn't it terrible that the only options to keep you safe are keep somebody who has not been like charged with a crime or sentenced for a crime in jail because they can't pay, or you're going to be harassed. And so like,
Mhm.
what is that like middle part? Like, what is you know the person that can, it's like shooting off the hip here, like the person that can like stand outside your house and like intercept your family member and be like, hey man, like let's sit down, like let's go get some water, let's play some chess, like like what are like the other options that will probably still be less expensive than throwing someone in a cage?
Mhm.
If we were to think about something differently, if we were to look at that person and say, like, well, they deserve something else. Like,
Mhm.
yes, they're making bad choices, and maybe why. And yes, like, maybe she's not the one, like, she shouldn't have to deal with it. Um, but, like, what if we were to put the resources into something different? And so when you talk about like drunk driving, like, yeah, it's the only thing is like to punish people after they drunk drive, or there are other things before the drunk driving happens. Like, colleges come up with like, call me for a ride systems in colleges. Like,
Mhm.
why isn't that just like a national thing? Why couldn't I
Mm.
call the police? I mean, police, whatever, whatever we call it, but this really
Right.
massively funded organization, and say, I'm too drunk to drive. Could you drive me home? No, we wait until I get into the car and then you pull me over. And then, so
Right.
we have to start thinking of like other ways to do it, because right now all we know is all we know.
Mm. Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking about uh, in my field of therapists and providers who work with people who've engaged in harmful sexual behaviors. It's an international field, and so I get to talk to people in other countries, and the first time I was at one of our international conferences, it was virtual, and because it was 2020, and a couple people were like, I feel indirectly throwing a lot of shade at the US, because it was like, oh, unless you're in a place that polygraphs everybody and locks them all up, like, this is what you would be
Ooh,
doing. Yeah, yeah,
sick burn.
yeah. I was like, oh shit. I didn't know it was gonna be so entertaining. Um, but so like there's this thing called circles of support. It's like a model that's used in some countries where like when someone gets out of, I think when they get out of prison, or it could be an alternative. I'm not sure exactly how it's used, but that instead of like a what we have here in the US would be like probation, you have a person who supervises you, right? And who um, all kinds of things can show up at your job, can show up and tries to, you can randomly drug test you, all these things. Circle of support is more like you have actual community members who have some training and who are really actively involved in being a support network in your life, helping you have connections and relationships. Some people lose their connections and lose their
Yeah,
relationships after causing harm or after incarceration. Um, and that isolation and that sense of social rejection does not, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It just doesn't help a person get better. It doesn't help
yeah,
them, be a healthier person. And so circles of support helps connect people to community, to resources, decrease loneliness and isolation. So there are some I don't, that's about as much as I know about it, but like, there are models elsewhere that exist that are kind of like a turn from what we have, a change.
yeah,
It's not like a drastic radical thing, but it also kind of is in comparison
yeah,
to the model we have predominantly in the US.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I won't even get into the fact that like we, as a country rely on the money, like privatized prisons and like just like enslavement, people
Yeah.
like benefit from people being locked up.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
phone companies, the cost, like I pay money to send emails to
mm,
people I know that are incarcerated. Like there's like I buy credits and then each email is a credit. And I'm like, y'all, email's free. like email is free, but like I'm buying it through a certain person, through a certain
right.
company and um and so there's all of that. But yeah, what you said about the community is so huge because and there is no right or wrong, but also like no one has to, like no one is like should ever be forced to stay in community with someone that's caused them harm. Like this is not what we're saying is like,
Right.
um, you know, you must understand why they caused you harm and like work them through it. Like that's not it. But
Mhm,
like everyone deserves a community,
mhm.
and it's not about who's right, who's wrong, who did the best thing, who should have done something different. Like, but you know what he did? You know what he did? I said to someone the other day, I was like, listen, you could tell me that you like each killed a bunny rabbit. And I'm not going to say, well, you're worse or there were, like that's not what I hear about. Like, how do we move forward? you
Mhm.
know, and we can go line by line about what you thought was messed up and what she thought was messed up and what, but like really it's like the how do we move forward? And so I'm trying to be someone who can support you and show you care versus coming at you like you're the worst or coming at you like she's the worst, because it's not about sides, it's about like what are we trying to do to move forward. Um, and so like having people who are willing to support folks and still be their community is so important. Like, and it makes me think about like the like recovery rooms, like in different, program spaces where like these folks, like when I first got into some like recovery rooms, I'm like, what do you mean you just want to talk to me? What do you mean you just want to call and check on me? What do you mean like you want to know how my day was? Like, why? Like, what do you want from me? Like, nothing. Just here to support you, you know? And that's not something that is like normalized in society, that like I could go and say like the worst thing I ever did, and like someone would be like, well, you're loved, we're gonna keep loving you till you learn to love yourself. It's like, really interesting, okay. And so like I think that there is a need for some of that, and right now all the resources just go into the punishment of it all. you know
Mhm.
there's not the capacity to say like, this person still deserves a sandwich. Like, you still
Mhm.
deserve to eat. you know and I was walking the dog a couple weeks ago, and I strolled up on like a bunch of cops surrounding this guy. And I was like, I'm just gonna lean here with the dog and I'm just gonna see what's going on. And at one point I was like, are you all right? And he was like, no, I'm not all right. Um, from what I picked up, like, he didn't have a license. He wasn't supposed to be driving, and he was driving. He's like, I'm just trying to get home. I'll leave the car. I'll get home a different way, but no, they like, we're like, we're gonna arrest you. And
Oof.
I was like, is there anyone I can call for you? And he's like, call this person, and like throws out a number. And I'm like, wait, say it again. The cops are like, back up. I was like, I'm trying to get a phone number. Like, can I call somebody for him? Because it could be hours before he gets to make a phone call. So I like call, they don't answer. Then I send a text message, like, sorry to give you this message. This guy said this thing, told me to. And she's like, and calls me back, and just basically like, he hasn't had any support since he's gotten out, and he's been trying to stay
Mm.
clean, and he's been trying to do all these things, and da 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 da, and like, she was just someone who like knew him through like a community program. And he had the number
Mm.
memorized, which like I don't have anyone's number. Like, I'm like, damn, like I would have been like, call my high school boyfriend. That's the last number I memorized. Maybe he can, but it was like another case of like, and what she said to me, she's like, that's his third strike. Like,
Ooh.
he's gonna get, I'm like, damn, like for driving, like he was trying to get home and driving without a license, And so it's just like, where is the system that's like, oh, you're trying to get home, young man? Let's bring you home,
Yeah.
and like, not for some exorbitant like, fee of Uber or anything, but like, let's just
Right.
get you home so you feel that there's another option besides like driving without a license.
Yeah. Ooh.
And she, it's so funny. She's on the phone. I was like, well, I gotta go. I'm just walking my dog. Like, I'm like, haven't even had coffee yet. It's really too early for me to be talking about the state of the world and policing. And like, I was like, well, thanks for what you do. Gotta go now. Oh, but
Yeah, I'm thinking about like, as I mentioned, my dad didn't, he lost his license twice. He had it taken away when I was a kid, and relied a lot on other people. He had to rely on other people giving him rides. That might also giving me rides if I stayed after school. I'd be waiting around, an hour or whatever to before someone was able to come pick me up. Um, and occasionally driving. If it had to get done, it had to get done. And I'm just thinking about that with this guy. Like, he's just trying to get home. I don't know the whole story, but at the end of the day, it's like he's just trying to get home.
just trying to get home.
Just trying to get home.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because this started with the DWI thing, which one of those penalties is taking your license away, which just further,
It's
yeah, exactly. And if you don't have a community or you don't have resources, community is a resource, or you don't have financial resources, or you don't have other people with resources, if you're more likely to get pulled over, like if you're a
yep.
person of color, like it's just feeding the corporate system, the money making system of like, once we got somebody, how do we get them
Yeah.
back here?
Yeah. 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 And there's something, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm like grasping here, but it makes me think of some of the programs like mentoring young kids, right? Where it's just like, big brother, big, big sibling, I don't know if they've caught
Yeah.
up, but like, and just like there's like I remember being patient and willing with some younger folks because I was like, I understand your situation. You're being a jerk to me. I'm the person that's gonna stay around regardless, because like
Yeah.
I'm this older person and like you're, da 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 da. Um, and I don't know, like once someone turns 18, like F you, no grace anymore. Like, like where are those like team up sort of, situations, like the person that you can like talk to, the person that you can rely on, like, um, you know, like why don't we have that sort of thing? Because I feel, we've been talking a lot about the socializing and community, right? Um, and actually, I went out to dinner last night. A friend was like, "Can we go to dinner?" And I was like, "I don't know. Can I treat you to dinner?" I was like, "Yes." Like, this is great. Um, and I swear this will make sense in a second, but I was just like, "Oh, I should like once a week come and like get some like dollar oysters." I was like, call my friends, and I was like, sometimes I feel like I don't have any friends. Like sometimes, and that's not true. It's our schedules, it's our alignment, but it's like on a Wednesday night, like it is very rare that I can just be like, yo, you want to go down the street and get some oysters, like, but I do deeply know that I have a really large community of people who, when there's a crisis, drop off food or like help me to contribute to, fix my car and that sort of thing. And like, and I know that like people rally for me.
Mm.
And having been a longtime community organizer, like I have tried to do court support for folks where like they don't have anyone that shows up for them. And so they're getting pushed aside in many ways. And then suddenly, if we can get like 100 folks to show, or even 20 folks to show up, the eyes are on and like the judge acts different. The judge is
Mhm.
like now suddenly going through all the proper things, And so it's just, yeah, if you're isolated, you're like more likely to just be pushed down further in to this system and then like back against the wall. And again, not saying it's not okay, but Aladdin taught us this, like I steal only what I can't afford, and that's everything, right? Like back in the day, we were like, oh, look at Aladdin. He has to steal an apple because he's hungry, but like we're not okay with that on a day-to-day basis, and food should be free and all those other things. But
Mm.
when people are trying to survive, things show up. And when they're isolated, survival takes a lot more.
Yeah. And everything has been privatized. Everything. We have to we have to buy to survive. Or if not, then yes, you have to take it. Because it's we don't really have the we don't our communities aren't set up anymore for like interreliance. Or some people might have garden. You need land to have a garden. You need like mostly you need private land to have a garden. Like not everybody even has green space like that.
Yeah. And it doesn't
Need
take
to know how
much
to
for
do it.
people.
Like
Yeah.
wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Knowledge that's been gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, this also like related to driving and DWI and it's interesting like whenever people ask the question of like what's the worst thing you've ever done, um the thing that always pops into my head is what I'm going to say, right? And I don't know that it's the worst thing I've ever done, but I feel it's the worst thing I've ever done because I intentionally chose to do something that felt like wrong, whereas I'm sure I've done lots of Um, but at like the height of my like drug addiction in college was on the other side of Boston, like up in like Jamaica Plain or something, and like missed the last T back to campus. And I was there with like my boyfriend at the time, and it was like, winter in Boston. And it was like we had like enough to get on the T and like missed that's the subway up in Boston, the T. I'm like, do people know that? And we hailed down a cab knowing that we didn't have enough money and like made the plan, and he was like, you're gonna get out first, and I'm gonna then like, pretend to pay, and we're gonna throw him the, $4 that we have, and then book it, like, and I remember like feeling like horrible about it, and also like probably would have died, like stuck that far away trying to walk home, like. And even now, I'm like, if I ever see that guy, like, man, I'd give him $100, like felt terrible about it, right? But like, what options did I have in that moment? And I could have been arrested and locked up, and like so many things could have happened at that point in time. And so yeah, like if you are punishing people, and I wasn't even someone like that wasn't, able to drive. It was just like I didn't have the capability to drive, and I did what I needed to do. And so like if somebody loses their license because of a DWI, but then they're sober, but then they can't get where they need to go, what are they going to turn to? Like they turn to a bottle to then make themselves feel better about the fact that they're isolated and they can't find a job, and they can't, and it's just like the punishment like really just harms any sense of progress.
Yeah, I wrote this poem years ago called Coping Skills, and it's about like how when I was a teenager, like I did a bunch of shit that was coping skills that like got me really, I felt really like socially alienated and isolated. Like I had drank alcohol, and I ended up doing that at school or on school property, and my friend and I drank on the bus. And unfortunately, I pretended like we were on a roller coaster going down a hill and was like, woo, and that kind of was the tip off. And um, so we got, and also I got too intoxicated. I ended up like falling and whatever. So I got caught. I got pretty sick from it. And then somehow throughout the day while I had to go to the hospital, um, they found out my co-partner, whatever, in this somehow, and so they also got in trouble, not as much trouble as I did. Um, and I ended up getting suspended for like 2, 3 weeks. And when I returned to school, one, I was really pissed about it because I didn't bring the alcohol, and like I didn't say that, but they knew that by the time I was interviewed, and I was like blue hair and wore chains and like Dead Kennedy's shirt, like just like very alternative for this like very like white school. And my friend was like on the softball team and on the soccer team, and like mom was on the PTA and da da da, and so like it just felt really unfair. um so I had a bunch of problems with that, but also I then like got stereotyped and like accused of being using drugs and stuff when I like wasn't even fucked up. And I just felt like I had kind of a scarlet letter, so to speak. Um, and that and like other things that I did in childhood, or yeah, I mean childhood as a teenager. Um, I often just felt like people responded to criticize my behavior and not really getting that I was in pain. Like some of it was a little experimental, and whatever, but like a lot of it was pain. a lot of it was like I was in pain, I was lonely, I did not feel loved, I was looking for something to do, I was looking to feel better, I was looking to have fun, like I was looking to numb out, depending on the different drugs I was using and stuff, like and I just was like further isolated. You know, that was one example, but there's other examples of like just being further isolated and stereotyped um and I just felt like repeatedly punished. Like I just felt like the punishment like never ended. Even when I left that school, 'cause we lost our house and went to another school where I flew a lot more under the radar, like I even then there got accused of being on drugs one morning when I was like depressed and scraped myself up to get to school to take a test. Like, and it
Yeah.
was like, you look high, you know, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I've been crying. Like, I'm fucking depressed. Like, I barely got my ass here. Like, I'm late because
Yeah.
I'm fucking depressed. Like, leave me the fuck alone. Help me or leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
But, like, so I guess, yeah, just, I don't know, that's just bringing me back to that sense of like the ongoing punishment that I think a lot of people, myself, related to experiencing of like you do something that's deemed wrong and not really realizing that, especially when I'm talking about like drugs and alcohol, like people are usually trying to cope. And that's the point of that poem that I wrote is like you what you see is all of this. In the midst of that, I was also writing incredible poetry. Like that's how I fell into my art and my poetry was during that depressed time. It's another way that I was coping, but all people really saw was these behaviors rather than seeing that I was just a person in pain and I
Mm.
needed help, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's like, that's a big thing that's missing. Is like, and it's not even just empathy, it's not even empathy, it's not even being willing to see it. It's like the capabilities, the time, the,
Um,
you know, and I am not going to defend any school administrator ever, but like with as much time as I spent in, in school suspension. But it's like also like, do they have the time to sit down and have a conversation with every child? And like, and in grown-up society, quote unquote, like, I do like more, free conflict mediation than I ever get paid for it, like, because it's like just not a resource that's like available, to a lot of people. And, you know, but we need to find spaces. Like we need to build spaces where people have the like willingness, desire, skills to like talk to people who might be acting out as like a coping mechanism, or because of a coping mechanism. Um, yeah. And I just have to say, like, um, I want to hear that poem.